Hi there. Welcome to the We Interrupt This Broadcast monthly roundup.
This is your roundup of what is happening in the Australian screen industry this month.
I'm Julie Eckersley.
And I'm Kirsty Stark. And between us, we've been involved in hundreds of hours of screen stories, myself as a crew member and producer.
And me as a producer, actress, and a commissioner. We're here to bring the industry together, start a conversation, and most importantly, keep you up to date on everything that's going on.
Make sure you subscribe to keep getting alerts on new episodes. And let's get into it. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Kirsty. Well, it's been another big month in the world of the Australian screen industry and beyond.
It has. And starting with your own personal news, you're moving to Queensland.
Yes, I've got an incredible job at Screen Queensland as Executive Director of Screen Content and really thrilled to be joining Queensland at such an exciting time. It's fantastic to be a part of it.
It all happened so fast, but I'm so excited for you. I think you're going to have an amazing impact in that role. And you know, every other state has to watch out now for what Queensland's going to be doing.
Well, I must say, every meeting I've been in so far for the job, I'm blown away at what is already in motion. So I'm jumping on a fast-moving train. Look, it certainly is an exciting time. And with 2032 coming up with the Olympics, there's a lot of focus on development in the screen industry and that sort of great two-speed where they've got the big Hollywood world and then the Brisbane Centre of Excellence for Gaming and so many wonderful production companies coming up there. It does, unfortunately, mean I'm going to be stepping away from the podcast. When you're in those public roles, you need to be, very, very clear and clean and neutral in all things. But we've had some fantastic applications of people who are looking to step into the role. So that's exciting.
Yeah, we've put out a call for expressions of interest and have had a lot of applications come through. So I'm looking forward to going through those with you in the next month, but you're still around until the end of 2025.
And exciting things coming up for the podcast as well, the AIMC Festival being one of them.
Yeah, AACTA Festival has just announced their program. It's a huge lineup of incredible speakers as usual. Anna Torv, Baz Luhrmann, Bruce Beresford, Chloe Hayden, David Michaud. Just the lineup is huge. So have a look at that program if you haven't already. And the podcast will be doing a session about the big ideas that have been coming out of the deep dive interviews across the last year and inviting anyone in the industry to submit their own big ideas that can shape our future.
So those of you who listen to our deep dive interviews, the final question we always ask our guests is what a big idea is that they have that would make the industry better for all of us. There have been so many brilliant ideas. So part of working with the AACTA Festival and part of moving forward is how the podcast can play a role in bringing those to life and tabling them and just putting some more heat behind all those fantastic ideas that have been coming forth.
Yeah, so if you will be up on the Gold Coast in February, I'd love to hear your ideas in person. If not, we will have a way to submit them online, so stay tuned.
So the other massive news that we have to talk about right at the top of the pod this month is the streaming quotas. All right, Kirsty, give us a headline of what has actually happened in quota world in the last few weeks.
Yeah, so this is massive news. After years and years of pushing from the industry and trying to get quotas in place, a bill has now been introduced to Parliament calling for regulation on the streamers to have a base level of expenditure on Australian content in their programming. So this is something that had always existed with the standard broadcasters, but never shifted once streaming came into place.
So it hasn't been passed yet, but it's been introduced. And what are the elements of the bill?
So essentially it's been introduced into Parliament. It now needs to pass both the House and the Senate with a majority vote before it goes into law. But what has been proposed is either 10% of an expenditure model, which means that streamers would need to spend 10% of what they spend in content for Australia in total. So that's the cost of any commissions, acquisitions, licensing for content that is shown in Australia. Or 7.5% of the revenue model, which means 7.5% of any subscription revenue that they get from Australians subscribing to their service in Australia. What the industry had been pushing for originally was a 20% model, which matches what France has as an example overseas. So we're not the first country to do this. It has happened internationally. And so going from 20% of revenue down to 7.5% feels like a huge drop.
So, like you say, this has been an ongoing fight. So many people have fought for so long and fought for so hard for this to get into place. So, a big win on one level to have a bill on the table. And there are arguments for and against both sides. Do you want to summarise each of those for us?
Yeah, one of the questions that has come up is this actually going to make a difference? What level are the streamers spending on content at the moment? And in the accompanying documents that explain the bill, there was an estimate from government that the expenditure requirement would equal out to around 175 to 200 million each year on Australian content across all of the streamers, which is very similar to what they are currently spending. However, that doesn't take into account the fact that some streamers are currently spending $0 on Australian content. So at the very least, they will need to step up and start investing locally. And if the others remain at their current baselines or improve them, then it is a win for the industry. It also means they can't go backwards.
Which, again, is a great win. And this only applies to streamers that have over 1 million subscribers within Australia as well.
That's right. So it will end up applying to 5 or 6 streamers across the board. Your Netflixes, your Apples, your Amazons, Disney, and Stan here in Australia.
So how soon do you think we could see this bill come into play?
It's all very much up in the air. It could go through very easily with no pushback from either side and potentially be across the line before Christmas, or anyone has the ability to add amendments to the bill in either House of Parliament. So if there is pushback from industry or pushback from the streamers, we could see further debate and changes coming through. So we're right in the middle of this. Keep an eye on it. Reach out to SPA, reach out to Save Australian Stories. Keep an eye on their social media for updates. And there will be a 4-year review of the legislation once it passes. So that's an opportunity to see how things play out and in 4 years' time make adjustments as required. It's not a perfect model, and it's probably not going to be the massive saviour that our industry hoped for. But the message I'm understanding, listening to some of the more detailed conversations, is that we are one piece of a much bigger political arena, and anything we do in this area could have impact on other industries. So it'll be interesting to see what the guilds and the unions come out with in the coming days and where we land.
I attended for the first time the AIMC Festival, which was really great. I was really impressed by the conversations, the panels, and the attendance level as well.
Yeah, what are some takeaways in the feature space at the moment? Because this is essentially a conference where all of the exhibitors and producers and business side of the industry get together and talk about Australian features.
So across the feature conversation, there is this idea of driving the Australian box office to 10%. So that's the shared goal. I was only there for a day, but there was lots of great data, lots of great intel being shared. Sashi Arnold did an awesome presentation that really looked into the detail of what does success mean, what do water flows look like, where does money come from. It was really helpful. And I moderated a panel on development that had Louise Goff and Bruna Papandreou and some other fantastic people. And in that conversation, we're talking about things that can be done to elevate Australian films to Australian audiences. And Bruna was saying, when Screen Australia did that bit of work around COVID, that it really did make a difference. And there are lots of ways that we can help promote things. One of the things Nat Lynch has often talked about is how few Australian films, when they're promoting on TikTok, have a buy now button. So, they're kind of practical conversations that were happening as well. And in amongst that, a sense that LA has now become the bank of Hollywood, as people are calling it, and a lot of productions are footloose, which is an extraordinary opportunity for Australia, and really looking at how we can build out our industry in the opportunities that are being presented at this time.
So essentially saying that the money is coming from Hollywood, but no one's shooting in LA anymore.
Yeah, I think that's what it seems to be. There's still a lot of foundational money coming in there and decision makers there. but that the logistics, the cost and the red tape of shooting it in LA have become too cumbersome. I've heard comment that Australia is continuously in the top 3 of those choices when people are doing their finance plans. So, again, really great for crew and ongoing work. And as we see this change in the market, I think, we're still going to have that top end and this growing creator industry, but the middle seems to be where it's struggling. So if we can be tapping into that top end and be a desirable location with our great offsets and incentives, then that also, again, helps buffer and grow the industry as we go through this change.
Yeah, it does. And then if we focus on that mid-tier, locally grown production and aiming towards that 10% of box office, I think that's really interesting as well. I did see a stat come out around the AIMC conversation that Indian films now surpass Australian-made films at the box office here in Australia, which I think is fascinating. There's just so much opportunity to tap into diverse storytelling and diverse audiences.
So much opportunity. That's so interesting because 4 years later that I commissioned at SBS, that did really well with audience numbers, and that has 2 Indian leads and was bilingual as well. This was also part of the conversation at AIMC, like what market opportunities, what do our audience want? When you look at, I think this week, Kangaroo became the top grossing Australian film of the year. So that's in a kids space, where we know that we can get some big numbers. Family films feel like they're really underserved, and there's a lot of global things that are also coming through around that. And so what are the genres and opportunities? Obviously, horror's having a moment, but there are other genres that audiences really want that we can be quite clever and aware of. And they're not necessarily in this time the darker, heavier films. It's other genres that feel like audiences are really hungering for at the moment.
Yeah, what do people want to leave their house for and have that communal emotional experience or fan experience?
So, look, I think what we're seeing is the evolution of our film industry, how it moves into the next incarnation. I was excited to see so many people leading and pushing that discussion forward. Louise Goff said really interesting things. I think it's very much on Screen Australia's radar, and that she even hinted that moving forward, we are going to see some different works coming through in terms of their agenda of how they're supporting Australian films. So hopefully, some exciting times ahead. Of course, it would barely be a podcast in this current time, Kirsty, without a little AI update. What have you seen happening in AI this month?
So, here at home, the government has ruled out changing Australia's copyright laws in the immediate future, at least, to include a text and data mining exception. So, essentially, it stops companies from being able to mine data for the purposes of training AI, which is a really strong move by the government and echoing what we've seen in other countries as well.
Denmark did something quite interesting too, didn't they?
Yeah, so back in June, Denmark said that they would actually be changing their copyright laws. And what they've done is ensure that everyone has the right to their own body, facial features, and voice. Also, very AI related, meaning that someone can't generate a digital image of another person and put it online for any purpose. That person owns their own identity, essentially.
That sounds very forward thinking to me.
Yeah, I think it's the first law of its kind in Europe, but probably a sign of what different governments are going to be wrestling with in future.
And I also noticed making headlines recently is the OMNI Film Festival, which is an Australian biannual, so twice a year, AI film festival that launched in 2024. But they made some headlines because George Miller came on board as one of the juries and has publicly, from what I've read, been quite positive about the changes that he sees. So an interesting film festival, really trying to capture what's possible in the generative AI space.
Yeah, it's an Australian film festival. It had 400 entries globally. And I watched the winning film, and I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes because it's this beautiful meditation on all of the forgotten movies, but not forgotten because they disappeared through time, but forgotten because they never existed and now they're possible with AI. So it's worth a watch, just looking at philosophically what types of storytelling AI now offers up.
Yeah, I agree. It was a really sweet film. It's called The Cinema That Never Was, and it does echo our conversation with Clayton Jacobson, where he was talking about the potential that he sees of AI to make all the films that he hasn't had the opportunity to make, which, certainly opportunity, new voices, lack of gatekeepers. These are all the things we're loving about this in the middle of the complicated other conversations around the topic.
A few movements around the industry. Dr. Belinda Burns has wrapped up as Chief Creative Officer at Screen Queensland after 5 years. And Ken Crouch is moving from Screen Australia to work alongside you also at Screen Queensland.
And also, did you see Amanda Brown is the new president of the Australian Guild of Screen Composers, which is great to see. We're, of course, moving into award season, so there's so many awards. We'll put a bunch of links in the show notes because there's really too many to call out, and that's going to keep on going in a frenzy through to 2026. And also upfronts season. So upfronts are really not quite what they used to be, but a really great way to get a take on what the priorities of networks are going to be into the new year.
Yeah, I love awards season. I just went to the ACS South Australia, Western Australia Awards, and it's just such an amazing night to see clips from everything that's been shot by the state's cinematographers across the past year. Also on the awards front, SPA Awards are now open for entry, so if you haven't submitted your productions, go forth and do that. And TV and online voting is open for the AACTA Awards, so get your votes in and support your fellow filmmakers.
Yes, there's also a whole lot of incredible opportunities that have come out of late. Again, we'll put all the links to them, but a few of the highlights, Kirsty?
Yeah, Screen Australia and Australians in Films programs, Talent Gateway and Global Producers Exchange are both open for applications until early December. I was a GPE participant myself a few years ago, and it's just an incredible way to get access to the US industry.
The IF Rising Talent list, which is a great way to get an idea of who's coming through in that next generation. Submissions for that are open until December 31st. And SBS has also put up $50K in development funding for bold, thought-provoking and innovative factual series, which is a really exciting call out.
Yeah, a great opportunity. And one I saw pop up, which I was really excited about, was ABC is bringing back Race Around the World. Do you remember that show?
Yes, I love that show. So good.
I'm so interested to see how they're going to adapt it for the current market where, everyone has the ability to get out their phone and document their travels. But I'm hoping it will be a really great opportunity to showcase some of those deeper, thought out documentary style stories as opposed to, quick TikTok style videos.
Yeah, but also there are those incredible range of creators on YouTube. So it'd be interesting to see how they're going to use the YouTube space and lean into that genre that really does already exist.
It's a really interesting multi-platform opportunity, isn't it, to showcase across digital and broadcast and see how audiences play between the two.
And potentially give some of that live behind the scenes, what's really going on. Again, so many opportunities, across platforms to open the door and give some live insights before episodes go to air. Because if I remember, the turnaround's really quick.
Yeah, I think it's 10 countries, 10 films and 100 days.
Exciting.
Yeah, and speaking of the creator economy, SPA is running a creator economy masterclass on December 10th. And some of our previous podcast guests are in the lineup. We have Natalie Lynch, Fred, who you interviewed just this month, and Georgia Mappin from Haven't You Done Well, plus Katie Elliott, who we haven't had as a guest yet, but she's making vertical content here in Australia through K29 Studios.
I was so excited to see this pop into my inbox. It sounds like a really great way to really start leaning into the creator economy because, as we know, getting that information, tooling yourselves up in the language, the opportunities, that is where you need to start in terms of expanding your career to make sure that you can ride the wave of change.
Absolutely.
And as well as that great day that SPA's running, there's a whole lineup of afters courses that have come out now, short courses across a whole range of areas. Certainly, if you're at that point where you feel like you want to upskill, whether you're kind of at a professional level or whether you're new in the industry, there really is a pretty broad range of ways that you can get the skills you need to make sure that you keep developing your career.
I think summer is the perfect time when there may be less production happening to step up and do that short course that you've always wanted to. So Afters has that amazing mix of storytelling, production, everything from creative through to technical. And because they sponsor the podcast, they have given us the code Summit 2026 for our listeners. So that will give you a 15% discount on any short course over the summer.
Hey, Kirsty, you've been watching anything that you'd recommend?
I had a great month at Adelaide Film Festival and then have had my head down working because I'm off to Japan today. So I've not caught up on a lot of TV, but I can't wait to watch All Her Fault, the new Sarah Snook show on Binge that was filmed in Melbourne.
Yeah, and I've been watching you on Stan, which is also such a great ride. It's from Lingo. It's got Aisha D in the lead. Really got a great cracking pace. Absolutely pulled me in, so I highly recommend it.
And you know how much of a fan I am of Lesbian Space Princess, the feature animation created here in SA. It's just picked up 2 more awards at Sitges and it's now on streaming. So you can watch it on Apple TV, Prime Video, wherever you buy your features.
Also, if you're in the Brisbane area, make sure you check out the Brisbane International Film Festival, which has a fantastic lineup. Kirsty, what's in production around the country?
Quite a few international projects again. Victoria has Empire City with Gerard Butler in starting in just a couple of weeks. Queensland has a show that I think is really interesting. It's Golden Ticket for Netflix. It's a Willy Wonka-inspired competition series, so it's reality, which I think is fascinating.
I've heard rumours that the set is amazing. I haven't seen it, but there were whispers that it looked pretty spectacular.
Every child's dream to get a golden ticket and go into the Wonka universe. Can't wait to watch that one. Over in Western Australia, the Engagement Party is shooting, as well as End to End, the recipient of Screen West's West Coast Visions program. And Twice Over is coming up with Mia Wasikowska and Charlie Heaton.
And that pretty much sums up our November. You're about to get on a plane to Japan. What are you doing over there?
I'm on the jury of the Japan Prize, which is an international children's television festival. First day was a finalist a few years ago, and they've invited me to come and judge an incredible range of shows from around the world, which has been a really beautiful experience.
That's fantastic. And people might not know this about you, but you speak Japanese and lived in Japan for some of your formative years, right?
Yeah, when I was 6, my family actually lived in Japan for a couple of years, and then I went back on a school exchange in high school. But it's been 15 years since I've been there, so I'm really looking forward to going back and just being part of that second home culture again.
Well, have an incredible time, and I'll see you next month for our final roundup together and a big roundup of everything that's happened in 2025.
Yes, and if you listen to our episode with Darren Smith, he will be coming back in December for a Q&A episode of the podcast. So catch up on that episode now. Send us your questions to weinterruptpod@gmail.com, and can't wait to get those last few episodes in the can for 2025. Now back to your regular programming.
We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions. Always was, always will be.